Welcome back to Campus USC students. I'm Mills Hayes with Student Gamecock Television. I'm here with Dean Bierbauer from the College of Information and Communications to talk about his decision to step down at the end of this school year. He is most well known on campus for overseeing the move of the journalism school from the Coliseum to its new location here on the Horseshoe. Dean Bierbauer, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Mills.
And we'll go ahead and just start diving in with the questions. Everyone wants to know, when did you begin to decide to step down?
Well, it's a process and it takes time. There are some things that I felt were important for the college. Certainly moving the journalism school, as we did a year ago, bringing in new directors for both the journalism school and the School of Library and Information Science, which is the other component of the college. Those folks are in place, Andrea Tanner in journalism, David Lankus in Library and Information Science. We've done some internal transitional things, some reorganization, and it seemed like it might be a good time for somebody else to take on this job.
Definitely a new transition period. What did your colleagues say or react? How did they react when they found out this decision?
You should really ask them how they reacted. I suppose some of them said, well, gee, we thought this was coming at some point. And there may have even been some who said it's about time. But this is my 15th year as dean. That's a long time at any institution, and particularly in this day and age. I am the longest serving academic dean on campus by a couple of years, and we're appointed for 5-year terms, so this year will be the end of my 3rd term as dean. I'm very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish. There's always more to be done, but I think for my purposes, for the college's purposes, and the universities, that this is just about the right time.
And are there any potential candidates to replace you? I mean, will you have a say on who your successor will be?
Well, there'll be a search. The Provost Gable, will name a search committee fairly quickly over the next few weeks. This is the way academic positions are filled. You have a national search. The position is advertised. People will see it. It'll be advertised in some of the specialized journals that academics read. And a lot of it will be word of mouth. There are certainly people that I will want to contact to see if they might be interested or if they know someone who is interested. And I expect that all of our faculty will similarly take that approach or may be interested themselves. But it's too early in the process to determine that. And the process would lead to someone being in place on or about July 1st of next year.
I'm sure we're all very interested to see who that will end up being next year.
Yeah, I am interested too.
You said it was your time. It was time for you to do something else. If not retirement, do you have any idea of what that might look like after you step down?
I don't. This was a step in the process, getting to the point when you say, I've done this a long time and it's fascinated me, and I've enjoyed it. I've liked most of it. Any job has things that are not as appealing as others, but I've thoroughly enjoyed being dean of the college. I love teaching and engaging with students, and I think we've come to the point where we've provided you as a student in our college and others with a facility that is greatly beneficial to what you will be able to achieve here.
And one of your visions as a dean was overseeing this new journalism school. As you said, what can you tell me about how that process began and how it fell out?
It began before I got here. My predecessors, other deans, even going back as far as Dean Scroggins, who was dean 30-odd years ago, realized that in the Coliseum, where the school used to be, the space was limited, the building was inflexible. We cannibalized as much space as we could for studios and offices and newsrooms, but we really needed to move on from there. The school had been in the Coliseum for 40-some years, and so over a protracted period of time, longer than anyone would have liked or would have expected, it was how do we get the school to a new location? How do we create facilities that are adept for the contemporary needs and for the future needs of what all of us realize is a rapidly changing environment for conducting communications, study and practice, whether it's journalism, whether it's advertising, public relations, mass communications theory, all of those things. We needed a much more contemporary facility. I think we've gotten that.
I definitely think we have. I know that for students coming to USC, they want to major in journalism. This has definitely been the fact that we have a new school. It's definitely been a deciding factor in helping them decide which college they want to go to.
And for students who are out there watching this, who are undeclared or have not yet decided, who want to know something about it, come take a look at the building. But more than take a look at the building, understand what takes place there and how communications is really a component of almost everything we do. You can go to the business school and they've got to have a communications function, or engineering, or the sciences, or nursing, or any of those things. What you are learning, what you and your contemporaries are learning here is that there's a communications role in almost any enterprise in society.
How do you think that this new building has impacted the school and the journalism students so far?
Well, I'm hoping that it's attracted, that it's brought people in who might not have otherwise thought about it, because we're on the campus tour. So when people come here as juniors and seniors in high school and are looking around, there's a wow factor to our building. You walk in there and you see all these screens, and we've got multiple computer labs, and we've got this studio here in what we call the greenhouse, and we've got another studio inside the building. So we've got a capacity to do a variety of things that I find exciting. I hope you find them exciting too. Nels. You aspire to be a broadcaster, and that in some cases to a 16, 17, 18-year-old might be, I hadn't thought about that, or I hadn't seen it in that light, which is what the Coliseum could not do. It didn't have the wow factor. It didn't have the ability to say, this looks interesting. I might really find a niche for myself in this environment.
Right. So since you're leaving, do you have a piece of advice?
I haven't left.
Oh, so,
I'm
not yet.
necessarily leaving.
But for the students that will still be here after you leave at the end of this year, do you have a piece of advice for those journalism students that will be a part of the transition period with the new dean?
I think you have to recognize that communications writ broadly exists in a fashion that it did not 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly not 40 years ago, or more when I was in college. I mean, look at the devices that we carry around with us. How we're recording this even as the Olympics are streaming live from Brazil, and you can watch it on your TV, you can watch it on your phone, you can watch it in a variety of places. We've all become digitally adept, and we've become multi-screened in a lot of ways. People talk about the important thing is that I reach you, but it doesn't matter on which screen, whether you're watching on a television screen or your laptop or your cell phone, but that you have access to information almost anywhere you go. And as practitioners in communications, we need to understand that people are not sitting down with the newspaper in the same way they used to, although I still like to read the newspaper at breakfast. They're not making appointment viewing for television in the same way that they used to. Yes, the Super Bowl will be on at an appointed time, but lots of other things we watch by binge watching, we watch by TiVoing, we watch by a whole variety of methods. And the same is true if you're in advertising or public relations and you want to reach people. You've got to reach them where they are in a fashion that's convenient to the receptor, not in a fashion that's just convenient for you and me as broadcasters to say, hey, it's 6 o'clock, watch the news. You watch it all the time and any time.
And you've talked a little bit about attracting journalism students who necessarily wouldn't have come here had it not been for our new building. Mm-hmm. What kind of sparked your interest in journalism when you were looking to go to college?
I did things that you probably did, or others among your classmates did. I worked on a high school newspaper and a high school yearbook. We didn't have a radio or a TV station, but just to have gotten engaged and involved, and I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed telling stories. So when I went to college, I started as a math major because my parents, I think, said, you're good at math, and why would you want to be a journalist? But I wanted to be a journalist, and so it didn't take me very long to say, no, this is what I want to do. And people should do what they want to do more than what someone says you're good at. You may not have a passion for it. So follow that particular passion. I think that's important. And we see this with the scholastic journalism program that we support here. We have middle school and high school journalists from across South Carolina and across the Southeast who come here to participate in workshops and conferences. And if they've got that kind of a passion, I think they should pursue it, because we still need storytellers, regardless of the medium, regardless of the platform, regardless of how big or how small the screen may be. If you can tell a story using all the things that are available to you, and it's in a digital environment, it can be animated, it can be data visualization, things that we really didn't have the tools to do that we now genuinely have.
No, and I'm sure that a lot of the journalism students here are definitely happy to hear that, and hear someone to reiterate saying that definitely follow your passion and that kind of thing, because obviously we hear over and over again about how our industry may be dying and print and everything, so it's definitely good to hear that kind of encouraging.
I don't think it's dying. I think it is being revived in a myriad of ways, where in my era there were 3 television networks, and most towns had 2 newspapers and a bunch of radio stations. But if you think in terms of how many platforms you can get to, how many apps do you have on your phone?
Oh, too many.
that deliver information? Exactly, don't we all? But that range of possibilities is now thousands, rather than 3 of these, 2 of those, 5 of something else. So journalism is being practiced, and communications in the larger context is being practiced in more ways and in more places and with more delivery systems than we've ever had.
And you did spend time as Washington correspondent for CNN.
I did.
What prepared you for that role?
My studies prepared me, my practice prepared me. I was with CNN for 20 years in Washington. And variously as a correspondent at the Pentagon, at the White House, covering the Supreme Court, covering lots of politics over that span of time. But everything prepares you for that. What you and I are doing is a step towards preparing you for whatever you might want to do. It's a cumulative process, and so your first job leads to your second job. What it is not is a straight line continuum that gets you from here to there to there to there. It's much more what I call a series of forks in the road. And you come to that first fork and you've got to decide, do I go left, do I go right? There's no necessarily wrong or right answer, but each one of those forks leads in a different direction. It may wind up leading you back to where you might have been had it been a straight line, but that's not the way it works. You have to make those decisions. Do I take a job out of state? I know there are lots of students in South Carolina who would love to work in Charleston, but Charleston is not the world. It's only a small component of it. And if that's where you want to work, fine, but gee, you've eliminated the potential of a job maybe in Charleston, West Virginia, or 1,000 other places. I don't think we should be too constricting in our sights at this stage, at your stage, because you might miss something that's just a little bit outside your peripheral vision if you're too focused on, I only want to be here. You can come back to that.
I do have to ask, with the election coming up this year, you covered 5 presidential campaigns. Can you tell me how this year's presidential election is different than any of the other ones that you've seen?
This year's presidential election is different from any other one categorically. I mean, think about what we have been watching. And it's not just Donald Trump, although Donald Trump is the most unpredictable, unanticipated, out-of-the-mold candidate that I have seen, and I've covered presidential elections going back to the 1980s and participated in them before that. He is different. He is defying convention. As we speak, he is not doing as well as he was during the primary campaign. And one of the things that contributed to that was having 17 Republican candidates. So if there had been 3 or 4 and Donald Trump was running second or third or fourth, we'd be having a different conversation. But it was because there were so many candidates, and they fractured the voting to the degree that candidates were getting 1, 2, 3%, and Trump's 14, 17, 18, whatever it might have been, was standing out because no one else had coalesced. So we've seen a very different process. The Republican Party, and probably both parties, will look back on this and say, what do we do differently next time to avoid getting ourselves in the situation where we genuinely do not know where this is headed? And for the Republicans, we have a candidate over whom we have very little control and a great degree of unpredictability. At the same time, we have a Democratic nominee in Secretary Clinton who has extremely high negatives. She's an incredibly bright woman. I know her. I've worked with her when she was dealing with the health reform during the Clinton administration. But she's got high negatives, and Trump has this high improbability factor. So a lot of people are, if not turned off by the whole process, are in a situation where they don't like either candidate terribly well.
And for a lot of the USC students here, it's their first time being eligible to actually vote. What do you think it's important for them to keep in mind when they're going to the polls with the 2 candidates that we have?
I think it's important for any voter, whether they're 18 or 88, to bear in mind that a vote matters. Cumulatively, we all have some even tiny weight in the matter, but it's not something that you should take lightly or shirk or say, oh, I won't vote. In essence, if you say, I won't vote because I don't like either of them, you've got no right to complain, regardless of how the election comes out, because you've abdicated that responsibility. But bear in mind that what we are doing in electing any official, whether it's the mayor of Columbia or the governor or a senator or a congressman or the president of the United States, is we're placing our trust in that individual. And we generally know pretty well what their policies are with regard to certain things. But what we don't know is what do they do in that moment of uncertainty. And life is full of uncertainties. So we would like our elected officials to be people that we have a measure of confidence in when the unexpected happens.
Right. When you were covering Washington, what was the biggest lesson that you learned that you think would help journalism students as they continue their education?
The biggest lesson, and I'm wary of questions that contain a superlative because it means biggest, largest, most exciting, best, worst. You pick it. It means weeding out a lot of other things that are important. The lesson is you're never done learning. There's always something more that you can track down. You work on deadlines, so if it's 6 o'clock and the news goes on at 6 o'clock, you have to have your report ready at that point. But it doesn't mean that there isn't more that you can learn. And stories evolve on a continuum. Today's story is only the predecessor to tomorrow's story, which may take it a step farther. You may know more tomorrow. You may have to backtrack on something you said today because it no longer holds true, but you deliver the truth as you know it to your best capability at the time you deliver it. And tomorrow we'll say, we've learned something new. And you try and continue to put things in perspective.
And with this will be our last question. Since you are stepping down at the end of this year, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave here at the J School and at the University of South Carolina?
And any one of us in a position like this, whether it's the dean, a faculty member, wants to step away saying, I hope that my students, and I hope that the people I worked with, that I was able to impart something from my experience to them, and that, you know, legacy may be an overworked word, but that people benefited from what I was able to derive from my experience and become part of their experience.
Well, thank you so much again for sitting down with me today, and I know that I can probably speak on behalf of all the journalism students that we wish you the best with anything that you decide to do after leaving here.
Well, thank you, Mills. I'll be around for a while.